My uncle kicked my cousin out on her 18th birthday with just 2 suitcases. I rescued her and gave her a home. Now she's going to college and he disowned her. But the family blames me for destroying our traditions. I'm 30 years old. My wife, Laura, and I have a farm of about 300 acres that basically became the gathering place for the whole family. You know, with 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms, it's perfect for when everyone comes over. And honestly, we love having family here, doing barbecues, celebrating birthdays, that kind of thing. But what happened about 6 months ago with my cousin Abigail basically split the entire family in two and turned our farm into the center of a conflict that still hasn't ended. I guess I should start from the beginning. When Abigail was little and her mom died, she was like 8 years old at the time, and her dad, Frederick, who's my uncle, remarried 2 years later to Sylvia, and from that moment on, Abigail's life was basically hell, though back then I was a teenager and didn't realize how bad things really were. The thing is that Frederick and Sylvia always treated Abigail like she was a burden. You know what I mean? Like, when they came to family gatherings at the farm, Abigail was always quiet in a corner, while Frederick and Sylvia talked to everyone else and acted like she didn't exist. I noticed it but thought, well, maybe she's shy or something. I don't know. You always try to justify these things because it's family, and you don't want to believe someone could be so horrible to their own daughter. Laura, my wife, from when we started dating like 7 years ago, always told me something was wrong with how they treated Abigail. She's very perceptive about those things. But I told her it wasn't our problem, that every family has their weird dynamics. Basically, I was a coward who didn't want to get in trouble. Everything changed about a year ago. At a Christmas dinner here at the farm, Abigail was 17, and Frederick announced, just like that, in the middle of dinner, that when Abigail turned 18, she would have to leave the house because he had already fulfilled his obligation as a father and didn't plan to keep supporting her. He said it like that, literally, in front of the whole family, and Abigail just sat there with her face red, trying not to cry while Sylvia nodded her head like it was the most normal thing in the world. I froze. Laura squeezed my hand under the table, and when I looked around, I saw that most of the family just kept eating like nothing had happened. I mean, seriously? Nobody's going to say anything? After that dinner, Laura and I talked all night about what to do. She wanted us to offer Abigail to stay with us when she turned 18, but I was afraid of causing a huge family conflict. You know, Frederick is my uncle. He's 56 years old, and he's always been kind of authoritarian and doesn't like anyone questioning his decisions. But Laura told me something I couldn't forget. She said, if we don't do anything and something bad happens to Abigail, are you going to be able to live with that? And she was right. Damn, of course she was right. So we decided that when Abigail's 18th birthday came, we would be there. For her, whatever happened. The following months were weird. I tried to talk to Frederick a couple of times, like casually, asking him if he was really going to kick Abigail out, trying to make him see reason. But he just told me that I didn't have kids, so I couldn't have an opinion about how he raised his. That Abigail needed to learn to fend for herself. That at 18, he was already working and supporting himself. All that typical speech from that generation that thinks mistreatment builds character or something. Sylvia was even worse. One day she told me that Abigail was manipulative and was just waiting to turn 18 so she could do whatever she wanted without consequences, which made no sense because they were literally throwing her out on the street, but whatever. Then the day came. Abigail's 18th birthday was in March. Laura and I went to Frederick's house early in the morning because we knew he was going to keep his word. When we arrived, Abigail was already outside with 2 suitcases and a backpack. That was all she had. 18 years of life in 2 suitcases. Frederick was standing in the doorway with his arms crossed and Sylvia was inside. She didn't even come out to say goodbye. Abigail was crying but trying to stay strong, and when she saw us arrive, her face lit up a little, like thank God someone came. We told her to come with us to the farm, that we had plenty of space and she could stay as long as she needed, and she just nodded and put her things in our truck. Frederick came over then and told me, "You're making a mistake, Jonathan. You're spoiling her. She's going to end up being useless and depending on others her whole life." I told him that the only mistake I saw was a father throwing his daughter out on the street on her birthday, and he turned red with rage and yelled at me that I was nobody to judge him, that Abigail was his daughter, and he knew what was best for her. Laura got in the truck with Abigail and signaled for us to leave already. So we left, leaving Frederick standing there yelling things at me that I didn't even process well because my heart was beating 1,000 miles an hour. The drive back to the farm was silent. Abigail was in the back, crying quietly, and Laura was holding her hand, and I was driving thinking that I had just crossed a line with my family that there probably was no coming back from. When we got to the farm, we showed Abigail her room, one of the upstairs ones that has a view of the fields and is super nice, and we told her that this was her home now, that she didn't have to worry about anything, that we supported her. She burst into tears again, but this time, they seemed like tears of relief. You know what I mean? Like when you finally realize you're safe. That same night, Frederick called me like 5 times until I finally answered. He was furious, yelling about how I dared to get involved in his family affairs, that I had kidnapped his daughter, which is ridiculous because Abigail is legally an RTN, adult and came of her own free will, that there were going to be consequences. Basically, he threatened me in every way possible without saying anything specific. I told him that Abigail was fine, and that was all that mattered. That if he wanted to come visit her, he could, but he had to treat her with respect, and he hung up yelling that he was never going to set foot on my property again. I thought maybe with time he would calm down, but no, things only got worse. In the following weeks, the calls from other family members started. Some supported me, like my cousin Rachel, who told me it was the right thing to do and that she had always known Frederick was a bad father, but most criticized me. They said I had created an unnecessary division in the family, that the issues between Frederick and Abigail weren't my problem, that now, family gatherings were going to be hell because Frederick refused to come if Abigail was there, and something weird started happening. People who used to come to the farm all the time suddenly started making excuses not to come, canceling at the last minute, that kind of thing. And I knew it was because Frederick was pressuring them to take his side. The first face-to-face confrontation was at my Uncle Theodore's birthday, Frederick's brother, like 2 months after Abigail moved in with us. The party was at Theodore's house, and I knew Frederick was going to be there, but I thought maybe we could be civilized adults about it. Wrong. Laura, Abigail, and I went, and the moment we walked in and Frederick saw us, his face completely transformed. Sylvia was with him, and she literally looked at me with disgust, like I was trash. Throughout the whole party, they avoided us, but I could hear Frederick talking to other family members loudly enough for me to hear, saying things like, some family members didn't respect others' decisions, that he had worked hard to raise his daughter and now someone else was taking the credit, all that kind of nonsense. The thing exploded when Abigail went to get something to drink in the kitchen and ran into Frederick there. I didn't see what happened, but I heard the yelling from the yard. Frederick was telling Abigail that she was ungrateful, that after everything he had done for her, this was how she repaid him, leaving with other people, and Abigail yelled back at him. First time I heard her raise her voice in her life, that he had never loved her, that he had treated her like a burden since her mom died, that Sylvia had made her feel like a stranger in her own house. When I got to the kitchen, Frederick had his finger in Abigail's face and she was crying but not moving, and I got in the middle and told him to leave Abigail alone. Frederick pushed me. Yes, physically pushed me, and told me I wasn't Abigail's father, and to stop acting like I was. Theodore had to separate us, and we left the party immediately. After that, the division in the family became official, let's say. Frederick started a kind of campaign to convince everyone that I was the villain, that I had destroyed his relationship with his daughter, that I was turning Abigail against him. Sylvia backed everything he said. Obviously. Most of the older aunts and uncles sided with Frederick because, according to them, you don't get involved in how others raise their children, no matter how horrible that parenting apparently is. But some of the cousins from my generation, like Rachel, supported me because they had also seen how they treated Abigail all these years. What really surprised me was when my Uncle Theodore called me one day to warn me that Frederick was organizing some kind of family intervention. Theodore didn't agree with Frederick, but also didn't want trouble. So he told me that Frederick had called a formal family meeting at my Aunt Ruth's house to discuss the Abigail situation. And basically they wanted me to go so everyone could convince me I was wrong. Laura told me not to go, that it was obviously a trap, But I thought maybe if I listened to what they had to say and explained my point of view, we could reach some understanding. Again, my mistake. The meeting was a disaster from the start. We were in Ruth's living room. There were like 15 family members there, and Frederick basically directed the whole thing like it was a trial. He started by saying I had overstepped my bounds, that I had irreparably damaged his relationship with Abigail, that I was confusing a young girl by making her believe she had no responsibility in her family's problems. Sylvia added that Abigail had always been difficult, that they had tried everything, but she was rebellious and a liar, which is a complete lie because Abigail is literally the quietest and most obedient person I know, precisely because she spent years walking on eggshells in that house. Then the others started talking, one by one, and most were on Frederick's side. They said I should respect parental authority, that even if Frederick had made mistakes, he was still the father and deserved another chance, that I was being selfish because now family gatherings were ruined by the conflict. My Aunt Ruth, who's like the family mediator, tried to find middle ground, suggesting that maybe Abigail could stay with us, but should maintain regular contact with Frederick and eventually go back to him. But I said that wasn't going to happen, that Abigail was staying with us as long as she wanted and nobody was going to pressure her to do something she didn't want to. Frederick then said something that still makes my blood boil to remember. He said that if I insisted on keeping Abigail in my house, he was going to stop considering that part of the family, and that anyone who kept supporting us would be out too. Basically, he was giving us all an ultimatum. Rachel stood up and said she supported me, that what Frederick was doing was emotional manipulation, and she wasn't going to be part of that. A couple more cousins said the same, but most stayed quiet or mumbled things like they hoped we could resolve this soon. I stood up and told them I had come, hoping we could have an honest conversation. But what had just happened was an attempt at collective bullying to make me do what Frederick wanted, and that wasn't going to happen. I left there with the feeling that I had just lost half of my extended family. Things calmed down a bit after that, in the sense that there were no more meetings or direct confrontations, but the damage was done. Gatherings at the farm weren't the same anymore. Way fewer people came, and the ones who did there was constant tension in the air. Abigail felt guilty about everything. She told me maybe she should leave so I could fix things with the family, but Laura and I made it clear to her that she wasn't to blame for anything, that the adults in the family should know better than to choose Frederick's ego over the well-being of an 8-year-old girl who just needed support. We decided, Abigail, we should start therapy because it was obvious she had a ton of things to process after years of emotional neglect and mistreatment. We found a good therapist in town, and Abigail started going every week. The therapist told us in a family session that Abigail showed clear signs of having been in an emotionally abusive environment, that her self-esteem was rock bottom, and she was going to need time and constant support to heal. Hearing that made me feel guilty for not doing something earlier. For all those years I saw the signs, but ignored them because I didn't want trouble. Of course, when Frederick found out Abigail was in therapy, he called me furious again. He told me I was filling Abigail's head with ideas, that therapy was a waste of money for weak people who can't solve their problems on their own, that I was victimizing her when she needed to toughen up, his exact words. I told him his opinion didn't matter in Abigail's life anymore, that she was an adult and made her own decisions, and he hung up, telling me I was going to regret all of this someday. I don't regret it for a second, by the way. Fast forward to about a month ago. Abigail had been accepted to a university about 2 hours from here, with a partial scholarship, and was super excited to start in the fall. Laura and I decided to throw her a celebration dinner here at the farm. We invited the cousins and aunts and uncles who supported her, like Rachel and some others. And it was a really nice night. Abigail was genuinely smiling, something she almost never did at first, and she talked excitedly about the classes she was going to take and what career she wanted to study. I was standing there watching all this thinking, this is right. She deserves this happiness. She deserves to have people celebrate her achievements. But then, like halfway through dinner, we heard a car arrive. We all went quiet because we weren't expecting anyone else. I went out to see and it was Frederick and Sylvia. My heart sank because I knew this wasn't going to end well. Frederick got out of the car with that face he makes when he's determined to get his way, and Sylvia came behind with that permanent bitter expression she has. I asked them what they were doing there, and Frederick said he had heard about the dinner, surely some family member told him, and he was coming to talk to his daughter. I told him he wasn't welcome on my property after everything that had happened, but he ignored me and went into the house anyway. Laura tried to block his way, but he dodged her and went straight to the dining room where Abigail was. Everyone froze when they saw him come in. Frederick looked at Abigail and told her, "It's time for you to come home. This nonsense is over. You're going to go to the local community college and you're going to live with us like it should have always been." Abigail looked at him, and for the first time I saw it. She wasn't afraid. She was angry. Abigail stood up and told him, "I'm not going back. I'm never going back. You kicked me out on my birthday, and now that I'm doing well, you want to pretend you're my father again? But you're not my father. You never really were. Not since Mom died." Frederick turned red and started yelling that he was her father, and she owed him respect, that she would be nothing without him, that he had fed her and put a roof over her head for years. Abigail, with a calmness that surprised me, told him, "Giving me food and shelter is the bare minimum expected of a father. That doesn't make you a good father. A good father would have made me feel loved and safe, and you never did that." Sylvia then jumped in and told Abigail she was ungrateful, that after everything they had sacrificed, this was how she repaid them. Rachel stood up and told Sylvia to shut up, that she had no right to speak after how she had treated Abigail all these years. And then chaos broke out with everyone talking at once. I got between Frederick and Abigail and told, "I've him to leave my house immediately, or I was calling the police." Frederick looked at me with pure hatred and said, "Fine, if this is what you want. If you want to play happy family without us, go ahead. But don't come crying when everything goes to hell. We're done. I don't have a daughter anymore, and you don't have an uncle anymore." They left, finally, and we all just stood there in shock for a while. Abigail was shaking and burst into tears, but Laura hugged her and told her she was amazing, that she was so brave to stand up like that. And she was right. I was super proud of Abigail. After months of therapy and support, she finally could tell Frederick what she needed to tell him. And even though it was horrible and traumatic, it was also liberating in a way. You know what I mean? Now, about a month later, things are weird. The family is still divided. There are people who still don't talk to me because they think I caused all this. There are others who support me privately, but not publicly, because they don't want trouble with Frederick. Gatherings at the farm are different now, smaller, but in a way more authentic, only people who really want to be there and support what we did come. Abigail starts college in 2 weeks, and she's excited and terrified at the same time. But she has a plan. She has support. She has therapy. She has a future that she chose and not one that was imposed on her. Frederick hasn't called or tried to make contact again. According to Theodore, he tells everyone that he doesn't have a daughter anymore, that Abigail betrayed him and he's never going to forgive her. Sylvia the same. She talks about Abigail like she was a mistake they could finally erase from their lives. Honestly, I think it's for the best, because Abigail needs to heal, and she can't do that if she keeps trying to earn the love of people who are never going to give it to her. The other night, Abigail came down to the kitchen while Laura and I were having coffee. After dinner, she sat with us and told us, "Thank you for saving me. I don't know where I'd be if you hadn't been there that day." And I told her not to thank us, that any decent person would have done the same. Though we know that's not true because many in the family had the chance to do something and chose not to. She said she felt guilty about the problems she caused in the family, and Laura told her something I thought was perfect. She told her, "You didn't cause any problems. You revealed problems that already existed. There's a difference." And that's basically where we are now. I don't know if Frederick will ever realize what he lost, that he threw out his daughter when she needed him most and chose his pride over his own blood. I don't know if the family will ever be whole again or if this is the new normal. But what I do know is that Abigail is better, that she's healing, that she has plans and dreams and people who support her. And for me, that's worth more than any awkward family gathering or the approval of uncles who chose to look the other way when a girl in their family was being mistreated. We did the right thing. I'm sure of that, even though it cost so much.